videos, we talked about the anatomical structure of the cornea, the refractive index of the cornea, radius of curvature of the cornea, astigmatism, all the things that was related to the cornea. Right now, in this video, we want to talk about the lens, which is another important optical element of our eye. So the lens, the cornea was, as I explained it before, is this surface. We have anterior surface, posterior surface, and then we have a liquid here that, we will talk about it later. But the lens is this part of our eye, which is very important because this part of our eye is a kind of part of our eye that is adjustable, that acts like a zooming lens. You have a movable lens in your zooming lens system, but here the concept is a little bit different. We change the shape of the lens in order to make the far object and close object remain at focus. Another name of the lens, we call it crystalline lens also, which, as I mentioned, this part of our eye that acts like a zoom lens for our optical system has two surfaces. The first surface is anterior surface and the second surface is posterior surface. We're going to talk about all the optical parameters related to those two surfaces. So one important thing about the lens in our eye or crystalline lens is that it grows continuously throughout the life. So from the birth to the last day of your life, the lens is growing. The lens capsule, which is this part around the lens, play an important role during accommodation process. I did a lot of research about it. Inside of the lens, that we call it lens bulk, it has some cells that it's a live organism. But capsule, it looks like it's not a live organism. So it's a kind of byproduct of our body that is not live, but it holds the shape of the lens. As I mentioned before, we have anterior surface and posterior surface. And you can see from this photo, the radius of curvature of both surfaces are not the same. So it's not a complete symmetric system. And in another way that we can actually represent this optical system is by principal plane of this system. So we have P and P prime roughly at this distance that, just accept it for now. Then I'm going to make another video about what are those, but those are principal plane of a thick lens that we can approximate it by two thin lens at those places. So we can say, each lens element, each optical system can be represented by two lenses at principal planes. So as I said, lens helps us for accommodate during accommodation process. That usually when we look at far distance, our eyes is at relaxed situation. So it means that the lens, these two surfaces are, the radius of curvature is pretty small, or you can say it's flat. Let's say just consider it as a flat. So we have some radius of curvature, but it's very close to flat. Then the light from infinity, we can focus it at retina. We call it relaxed situation. Then when you want to look at object that is close to your eye or near vision, our eye automatically change the focal length of the lens of our optical system or the power of that lens. We should increase the power to see object that is close to your eyes. That whole process, we call it accommodation. And this situation, we call it accommodated, which means that, the lens is changes shape. So now let's look at the different part of this actually image. We have the cornea that I explained before. This is the stop our eye, but half of there is a line, half of it is for relaxed situation. When our eye is at relaxed situation, there are some kind of something like a line or belts you can see in this photo that is attached from the lens to the ciliary muscle. That this is a kind of muscle that we have in our eye. Those lines or those belts are usually when we are looking at far distance or we are in the relaxed situation or distance vision, they're under stretch. As you can see, they're under stretch, so our eyes is relaxed, and the lens, because it's under stretch, the lens to surfaces radial curvature are very big. When you want to see, okay, when the radius of curvature of two sides is big, what does it mean? It means that we are getting closer to a window. So window doesn't have any power. So the power is lower. And we have these two principal planes and nodal points at these two, roughly these points. And then when we want to look at a near object, our ciliary muscle contract and push. Actually, there is no push. We just remove the tension on those zonules part of our eye, and then the lens, the radius of curvature of both sides of the lens changes, and that process increases the power of the lens. As you can see in this photo, is contracted, and the radius of curvature is actually smaller than this one. This one goes to infinity, close to infinity, so the radius of curvature is bigger. And this is I think SEM image of those parts that I said, from the lens to the ciliary muscles. So now let's look at the whole accommodation process. So first we have contraction of ciliary muscle. Those ciliary muscles, they get contracted. That cause change in zonular tension, those parts that I mentioned before, those lines that is around the lens, it changed the tension on those, and that caused change in lens shape. So the shape of the lens in our eye changes, and then that change of shape cause change in equivalent power of the lens, which is an optical element and is important for us. And that change in optical power allows our eye to focus on an object at different distance. So when you're looking at object at different distances, that's the whole process that is happening in our eye. That's the reason that this kid can see pretty close to his eye and also can see very far distance. So let's look at the accommodation process again. Under tension, then contracts, remove the tension on those zonules parts of our eye, and then it makes it more circular, increase the radius of curvature, and increase the power. So the lens in our eye has two main parts: the nucleus, which is the center of the lens. We will talk about the refractive index and everything about the lens, and the cortex. The nucleus is the part that is present at birth, and the cortex is the outside nucleus that made after after our birth, and as I said, it's growing the last day of our life. And then we have capsule, which is something that is around the whole cells that are inside of it, and we have epithelial cells around it. And that's the whole part of we will talk about because the anatomy is not that important for us, but we want to talk about the refractive index of the whole our lens in the lens in our eye. And thank you very much. Those are the references that I use for this presentation.